And so right now, Maggie, you're in Rockford.
I'm in Rockford, right.
And what do you do there?
I'm the news director at WIFR, the CBS affiliate in Rockford. So we're Channel 23, been around for quite a while, and we're the Gray station in Rockford.
The Gray station?
Gray Television.
Oh,
So
I saw. Okay.
the company who owns us is Gray, and very proud to be Gray.
Okay. Oh, so they're a good company to work for?
It's a great company to work for. I usually say that when I interview people. I said, they could fire me tomorrow and I'd still say they were a great station or great company.
Wow.
And I think that means, that says a lot, especially when, you see so many changes within our industry and so many different companies. And Gray has shown time and time again, even if you didn't feel that way before, definitely after the pandemic, they always reassured us that, things were good, things were stable, things were solid. They weren't going to make major cuts. They weren't going to do, they weren't going to furlough. They weren't going to do that. And they stuck by it. And I think that meant a lot to all of us and all of our employees. And you don't often see that. And I think Gray really took it to heart.
Yeah, because sometimes companies say, oh, we're not going to make any changes, but they actually are.
Yes, exactly. Right. They didn't. We actually, not only did we add newscasts, we added staff. We actually added an OTT desk or CTV desk.
What does that mean?
It's basically it allows you to go live at a moment's notice on your app, on air, whatever. It's basically a backup control room in your newsroom. And they gave it to all of the Gray stations. And then, so not only did we have that, and like I said, we added a newscast, but, we received, the company granted bonuses when most of us didn't think we would ever get one. And again, because of the industry and the pandemic and things were tight, but they did. And, it meant a lot. It meant a lot to so many of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
So basically people should apply to Gray. I've also heard good things about Tegna.
Yes. Apply to Gray. Yes.
Gray and Tegna, because
Yes.
Jeff Burnett, who I interviewed previously for the INBA, he said Tegna's great too. So.
Yeah. I mean, there are good companies out there. And it's hard to tell somebody who's just getting into the business, make sure it's the right choice. Make sure you research the station, make sure you research the company. And sometimes it's just that I got to get a job. I got to get my foot in the door somehow, some way. And you don't often think about, hey, is this company going to be good for me? Is it going to help me grow? Is it going to help me move on? And you've got to take that into consideration. And, I think so many of the colleges are good about giving that heads up. But, there still are some out there that just say, look, just get your foot in the door no matter what. And, it's just sometimes not the right fit. And it has to be the right fit. Always has to be.
Well, yeah, no. One question I have is because I saw something on LinkedIn. Somebody used to work in media in another state, and they were saying they help people to transition out of it.
Yeah.
And they were saying, the pay is horrible and you can make better pay and be more respected in these other industries. So what about the pay? Because I know in TV in smaller markets, it's not as good.
Yeah. I don't think any of us, as well as I do, I don't know that any of us really get into this business because we think we're going to get rich. I think it's more about the belief in, First Amendment, freedom of speech, the right to know, helping, be that voice and kind of be a watchdog. I think all of us have that. That's our sense, right? That's what we want. But, pay, I remember, my first job making $5 an hour, $5.25. Of course, that was, eons ago, but, $5.25 an hour. And I got a quarter raise and thought I was rich, but I believed so much in what we were doing that it didn't matter. Now, I do think, I think that we have to make changes. We have to make changes. And, you know, I can only speak from my company's perspective, but when I started at this position, in this position about 5.5 years ago, that was one of the things my general manager and I talked about was we have to make a change. I don't think we can hire people and the people we need at $13 an hour. And he agreed. And so we started to make some incremental changes. And it started to help. But then Gray, during just about a year ago, made a decision so they have a bottom line hourly rate, and no one, you know, and that was $18 an hour. And so that's where it starts. And that's for every position, right? But you know, it doesn't mean that's what you're going to be offered. I mean, you could be making more, but at least you know that somebody's not making $13 an hour, you know, who can barely survive. You know, gone are the times that I think, I mean, we require so much of them. It's hard to get that second job, third job, whatever. And that seemed to be so common when I first got into the business. I mean, you didn't just work one job, you did side things on the side. And that's not really good anymore. I mean, we accepted it. At least the newer reporters and people are saying enough, you know, that's not, you gotta pay us, you know, you have to at least allow us to get a living wage. And I think that the companies are starting to pay attention to that. But again, that goes back to doing the research of the station and the company that you're working for and saying, you know, is this right for me? Yes, you have to go into it with the expectation I'm not going to get rich right away. You know, I got to kind of pay my dues a little bit, but I think, you know, finding that right entry level, and I think other companies are starting to follow suit, you know, seeing what, you know, as companies like Gray and Tegna and different ones say, hey, you know, we got to start paying our people more, then others are starting to look at it and saying, yeah, we got to follow suit or we're going to we can't be competitive.
Yeah, because now people need video editing skills and writing. Writing is a big one.
Yes.
It's huge. I mean, because, and also just to write to deadline and you have to be correct.
Yeah. Well, and that's, you know, and that's where I see a lot of the stress too. You know, we have newer, you know, reporters who are just getting into the business, and it is that panic of, you know, I mean, it does seem like a lot. You've got to go out and get the video, you know, especially MMJs. You got to go out and get the video. You got to write the story. You got to set up the interviews. You got to do them. You've got to then get back. You got to write it. You got to get it approved, and then you got to edit it, and then you got to get it on the air, right? And it can feel overwhelming. And so, you know, it's, you know, it's hard to tell somebody just getting in the business to expect that, right? And it can weed out people pretty fast. And I don't know if weed out is the right word. These people are talented journalists who could be very talented journalists and a benefit to our industry, but we tend to run them out sometimes, right? And you've got to be there as a station and as a, you know, with the pay and with the it starts with pay. It starts with knowing the staff. It starts with offering them outlets to, you know, deal with that stress. And, you know, look, have an open door policy. Come in my office. You know, let's talk about it. Let's figure out how we can make that work. And so it isn't just pay. It's, you know, all that too. Does that answer? I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of the same. This is kind of the same thing, right? And writing, I am a biggie on the writing, right? So
very important,
yeah, I started, you know, in TV and thought I was a good writer. You know, I'm good. I can do it. I can write quick. I can write fast. And then I actually took a different path into newspapers and went, oh, I'm a bad writer. Nothing good.
But writing for broadcasting is different than
very different.
Writing for,
It is. But you know what? I find more and more as you're writing for, you know, the website and things like that. And then, but I learned so much more and I was many years into my career when I went to the newspaper, because suddenly I was paying more attention to all the pieces and how they all fit together. Before it was just, let's write a 20-second VO and get out the door, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I now was looking at it in a different way. I think that making that switch to newspapers for a little while it was a tough transition, it was probably the best transition for me. And now I feel like I can talk to, some of the reporters and writers here and say, this might be better, right? And I learned how to be an emotional writer. I really wasn't that before. I was very straightforward, very cut and dry, and I learned to be emotional, and I learned to, convey that emotion through my words, where it was easier when you do TV because you have the video and you have the sound and you have all of that, and that can convey a lot of emotion. But it's hard when you have to sit down and try to write it out. And I think that helped me, and it helps me talk to them, because again, people connect with people, and you want them to feel something, whether it's anger or whether they feel satisfied or they feel happy or they feel frustrated or they feel energized, right? Any of that is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to move them enough to take action in some way, right? And so that's what we try to teach all of our writers. But I don't think, there are some broadcast programs that really focus on writing, and God love them. And then others say, well, the writing isn't as important. It's more important to have the video. I think it has to be all together. Like at Illinois State University, they have a program where it's all together, right? They take all of those pieces and put them together from, and they all work in the same room and they all work in the same office, and they are, they learn how to mesh the two together, and why they work together so well.
Well, one thing about, I do want to ask you about your newspaper experience, but one thing I notice about newspaper writing and magazine writing is they always start out with an anecdote, and I just sort of skip over it to get to the information. I know they do that to bring us into the world, but it seems like it's very common in newspapers right now.
It is. I mean, they have to draw you in. And we are all fighting, right, for those eyes and for that moment. And so they're doing the same thing. They're just trying to get your attention. And it's unfortunate, but at the same time, I think it teaches us to be more aware of, look, we've got what you need, and trying to make sure you're writing that story as to what they need. It is what it is. I mean, we're all businesses still, and at the bottom line is we're a business, and we have to get as many viewers as we can, and readers and things like that. And newspapers, unfortunately, they have to compete with us now just as much as ever, as more than before. They have smaller staffs. They're trying to make do with what they have, and learning how to steal away the broadcasting people online and through social media.
Right. But now, what do you do as a news director? It seems like it's a very hard job, and it seems 24/7 and incredibly demanding.
So it is. I mean, there are days when it's really tough and I don't want to come in. Oh my gosh. But at the same time, when I'm here, I love it. And I think that, so basically my day is, we kind of talk about our stories in the morning, and you're part of that editorial, you're part of the editorial team, and you're helping to guide it a little bit. You're asking the tough questions when you need to. We operate day to day as, just keeping the newsroom running, making sure we have the budget, and, I maintain the budget. I do the hiring, and we also kind of look long-term and see where we're going and planning. But a lot of it is, just a lot of teaching, right? Because we're in Rockford, and we have a lot of people who are in their first job. And so they're still learning what we do, and they need guidance, right? They need that help. And it's not that they're doing anything wrong necessarily. It's just, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you do this? And so there's a lot of the day spent doing that. I actually, to me, that's the fun part of what we do, because we do get so many people early in their career. And it's kind of cool to watch them grow and see the excitement that they have when they first start, and they want to do so much and so well. And it's nice to see the growth of, this is where they started and look where they are now, and look how much they've grown.
Yeah.
And I love it when I get a story, because we read through, there's 3 of us in the newsroom who read through pretty much every story that goes on the air, right? So whenever a reporter writes something, we go in and we read through it, before they even cut it. And it's kind of nice to see the progress. And it's always exciting to me that one day when I go into their story and I don't fix anything, or I fix just little things, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, right? Look how much this person's grown. And so I think that's kind of exciting for the news directors, because you can sit and watch them and watch them grow. And then as far as, you're on 24/7, but you are as a journalist too, right? Our ears are always open and our eyes are always open. And it isn't too often that we actually, just kind of shut down for a while. But for me, I think it's much easier, because I was a news director before, but then when I came back to it, I actually think I was better because, my kids were out of the house. So I didn't have that anymore. My husband works in public radio and he's off on doing his thing. And this is my home. This is my family too, right? So I see it kind of as this is kind of a cool place to be. And I love that all the new things we're creating. I love to see, we're doing right now TikToks. We have a reporter who does, a lot of his stories are on TikTok, and it's kind of cool. He's creating them through TikTok, right? And then sharing them to other outlets, not the other way around, where you create it in one place, but then break it down for TikTok. He's actually creating it through TikTok. And that's kind of exciting, those new things, those fun things, but they have such cool ideas, and they, you're able to take some of that and hey, maybe we should try this. And I say, oh yeah, let's try that, and that's kind of fun. So being a news director, yes, it is 24/7, but it's also rewarding in so many ways. I think there are days that stink and you don't want it, you just kind of like, I got a headache, I gotta go away. But those aren't that often. They're pretty few and far between. And when you have a great staff, it makes it that much easier. And
I was going to say, if you have a good team, it really makes it incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have right now, I'm pretty excited. I mean, the energy in the newsroom is pretty strong. And I love that, because I think they work well together. They know each other pretty well, and they just seem to gel and kind of have each other's back when you need that, when you need to have somebody's back and they need your help, they're there, and they understand how each other works. So they're able to make that change and adapt.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, and it's very hard to find that situation.
Yeah, it is. And, and the other thing too, I mean, this because you've worked in assignment desk. I mean, that job is a tough one, right? So
I've never done assignments. I mean,
I see. Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a tough one, right? And we're lucky. We have somebody who's been in the business for a while, and she's so strong, and she's our managing editor, and love her to pieces. It's such a tough position. But what's even harder is, especially in small markets, you always have those news reporters coming in, right? Those new reporters. And while it's exciting, they don't know a lot about the communities they come into. So you're having to reteach all that over again. Okay, the public safety building is here, the courthouse is here, the federal courthouse is here, and it's hard to keep reteaching that. And so, you got to give them credit, because, they're having to deal with that constantly throughout the day. And so, but I think, when you have a good one like her, I think it makes it the whole day a lot smoother, a lot easier.
And it sounds like you have to be very patient.
Oh yeah. I never see her get flustered ever. Her name is Laura. I never see her get flustered, and God love her for that. So, because some days when I'm losing it, she's Miss Calm, and it's great, right? She never gets angry at them. She never gets frustrated. She just goes about the day. And that's pretty wonderful. So.
Yeah. Does anybody ever go to Rockford and say, I just want to stay in a small market, or is it really a lot of people just want to move on?
It's because a lot of them are early on in their career. They say, we want to move on, right? And so you kind of expect the fact, I kind of resigned myself to the fact that they're not going to stay in Rockford for the rest of their lives. But when we do get someone who does, we have several who have, moved here and said, or they met their significant other here, or they've, purchased a house here and they decide this is where they want to be. We do have several of those, which we're grateful for, but, most of them are, they're at the beginning of their careers and they want to kind of spread their wings a little bit, and that's fine. So we accept that. And we just love them for who they are. The Rockford's unusual, and I love the Rockford community because they love it, right? So we hear so much from our viewers. I remember them when I remember, she was so bad when she started, but she's so good now. and I remember her. Look what she's doing, and they're so excited by it. And it's kind of cool, right? Rockford sees that, at least our viewers do. They see it as kind of a badge of honor. They've watched these people get, grow. And so, yeah, we do see a lot who move on and move up. There are some who are different. I actually worked in Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked in Chicago, and I chose a smaller market, not because part of the reason was we were able to buy a house out here, but and we couldn't in Chicago, but I actually prefer the smaller markets. I think it's, when you talk about local news, this truly is the heart of local news, right? Is this community, these small communities, these communities. And it's, like I said, it's that very ground level work. And I think it's awesome to be able to kind of be a teaching place where people can get their skills and hone their skills. And when they're ready to move on, they'll move on. But I think you just have to resign yourself to the fact that, you're going to keep them for a while. But look, when you move on, send people our way, when you see somebody else getting into the business. And I think all the news directors in Rockford kind of feel the same way. It's just, we understand that we're going to keep them for a drink of water. So you get as much as you can while they're there.
But do you know people who went to other places and then they went back to a smaller market?
Yeah, well, I don't see a lot. There are a few here and there. Usually what they'll do is they'll move up and then move out. They'll go to PR, or they'll go on to something else, and that's good too. Life changes, life gets, your life changes and you grow and you figure out which path is yours. You just don't see a lot that go back to smaller markets. I think it's just our industry, right? We grow up and we see all these big names, and back in my time, it was Barbara Walters and Jane Pauley and, and Katie Couric, and we all wanted to be them. But I don't know that, and so I think that's still there to some extent. They want to see how far they can go, and more power to them.
Well, also the thing is about the very large markets, like what you're talking about, the national, it's very cutthroat. So people have to be willing.
It is, right? And I feel like sometimes, there are so many that move on and move into great positions, but so many get lost in it, and I would hate to see that. And I don't like to see people get out of the business. I don't, especially if they are talented. You just kind of go, oh, are you leaving the business? Why? And that's sad. Those are sad things. And like I said, that's where we as an industry need to kind of take, really look internally and say, are we doing everything we can for our employees? Are we helping them, through this struggle? You're always going to have a few who leave, but you don't want to have a whole bunch of them. You want to be able to give them what they need to succeed, and whatever that is. So that's us as broadcasters who have to really look at it closely, and managers and companies.
Yeah, what was it like to work for a newspaper? What newspaper did you work for?
So I worked for Gatehouse, which was the corporate office for the Rockford Register-Star here in Rockford. And then I was working for a division and part of the news division, and we moved the operation down to Austin, Texas at the time. And I was going to go, but my family really didn't want to move. So we decided to stay. And so I was working for the Rockford Register-Star, and I was a writer and did some editing, and and that was fun. I mean, it's a good environment. It was a great environment. Still close with a lot of people who I worked with there. And like I said, they were also welcoming. And, even though I only had the broadcasting background, they helped me make the adjustment to print, and they did a great job. But I wouldn't trade that time. I think I needed that time to really realize what I wanted to do. And but it's a very different world there.
Yeah, how's it different?
It's so they're so manager heavy, or at least when I was there, it's very manager heavy, or it was. And so there were a lot of, editors and, people making good money. And it seemed like there weren't as many people on the street. And like I said, that was by the time I got there. And, that gets hard because, you're doing the job of 2, 3, 4 people really. And it was just a different timing thing, right? So in broadcasting, everything is immediate, and there was more accountability. So when you were assigned a story, you had to check in. You have to check in constantly with your desk, and you're constantly checking in, and you're constantly making calls. With newspapers, as long as you got it in by 3 o'clock, as long as you got it in by 4, or that you hit that deadline, I don't care what you do during the day, that kind of thing. And so that was hard to take. It's like you have to set those own deadlines in your head. As broadcasters, we live and breathe by those deadlines. We'll push it to the last minute. And so when you just let us free, it's kind of like, oh, what do I do? What am I doing? And so that was a change. The other thing was really understanding, one of the big things was, we always talked about assignments. We had our assignment board, right? And the newspaper, they're budgets. They call them budgets. And so the first time I was like, they're like, well, what's the budget? And I said, oh, I don't know. I don't deal with the financial part of it. And they're like, no, we mean the stories. What stories are you covering today? And it's like, that's a budget? No, that's not a budget. A budget, deals with numbers, right? So that was a little bit of adjustment. Some of the words, the different phrases and things like that. But when it gets down to it, the writing is so much, like I said, it's something we as broadcasters really should adapt some of what they have, and they should adapt some of what we have, because it is a very, again, people connect with people. So you have to find those emotional connections within that story, right? So how can I make people understand this and believe it, and, and trust that the information is right? And I think, it just gave me basically a sense of stability with my writing, and a sense of I'm comfortable with my writing, right? I can always be better, but I'm comfortable with what I do now, and I can help others, find that same voice and find their voice, I guess, is really what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I guess the thing about writing, especially nowadays, is you have to sound like a person. You're not going to, like in 1972, they were sounding more authoritative and distant, I think.
Yeah. And it's, and that's a phrase we use a lot here. is, people connect with people. And so we always say, find that personal angle within a story, because, and again, it goes back to that, we're just trying to compete for people's attention, right? And when you've got 15 million things coming at you and all saying they're news, on social media and on the TV and, wherever you pick up, whatever you look at, and you get so much of that. And so we're fighting for that attention as well. We want you to come to us. And so you have to figure out a way to connect with them. You have to figure out a way to draw them in. You have to figure out a way to give them that information in a very understandable, very conversational, very comfortable way. And that can be hard sometimes, right? So that can be, to know that how to make somebody feel something is so difficult at times. When I was younger, I looked at them as words. They were just words, right? Now I look at it and find the connection and the emotion and stuff like that. And that, I think, starts to help you form your stories so that they have some impact.
But see, I really think it's hard to achieve that under tight deadline. Like
it is. Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah. So,
terrible.
I mean, you have to, yeah, it's nice if you have some time to think about it, but if there's a shooting and then the information's changing.
Yes.
And you're on air in like 2 minutes. You got to put that in there.
And that's true too. I mean, that's a totally different, totally different aspect, is how do you turn it quick? Who do you talk to? What do you need to get out there? And so often, like with breaking news, it's just, I've seen people freeze at breaking news. And it's, it's awful. It's, and you want to help them through it. But, you're right. You don't have a lot of time to think about it. You got to have kind of, and sometimes I think too, it's having a little pocket of, like, let's say a fire. If you're writing a story about a fire, right, you probably have in your head that template, right? So if you have to write it fast, I can write a fire story really quick, right? I got that template in my head. But then you use that template and then you can go back and look through it quickly. And, if you need to go on the air right away, you can use that template. You've got kind of a pattern by which you can get it out, get the information out right away. And then you can start to tweak, right? That next cut in, that next hit, that next piece of information you share can be a little bit different, right? You're constantly adjusting. And so that, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a different beast, breaking news often. And it's a hard one. That's one that even, those of us who've been in the business forever struggle with sometimes. Just being able to adapt to every element that's out there. It gets to be a struggle.
Okay, so before you in Rockford and before you worked for the newspaper, what did you do? And you only worked in TV, right? You never worked in radio?
Right. Well, yeah, sort of. So when I went to college at Illinois State University, and my first job was doing news for the country music radio station down in Bloomington Normal. And I'd do it, I'd go in 2 or 3 days a week and I would do the noon, lunch news break or whatever. And it was at WMLA. And then I just stayed there and I was on their request hour in the evenings. I'd work like 7 to midnight and I would do the request hour at night. And then I worked at TV 10 or I went to school did the TV 10 program. Then I went to WCIA in Champaign and I was a producer there. So actually, John Paul, who's big in INBA, and Molly Hall, who just recently passed away, they actually were the anchors on the first shows that I actually produced. And then I went to Charlotte, North Carolina. I got married and moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was working at WBTV. I started it was when some of the stations were starting those 24-hour news sources, that saying that was out there. And I was the overnight anchor for them. And then I started doing cut-ins during some of the basketball on Saturdays. And then they are the ones who kind of got me interested in the assignment desk. And then we moved back to Illinois and I worked at Fox in Chicago. I was a freelance producer for a while. And then I started as I started working on the morning show when they started Fox, their Good Day Chicago. So when it first started, I was there as a segment producer, and was there for a few years, and then we moved out to Rockford. And I actually started here at WIFR. I worked here as the assignment editor, and then I made the shift. I actually got hired as the managing editor over at the competition, WREX. And I worked just a year or so as the managing editor, and then I became the news director. And so I've actually worked at all three Rockford TV stations. I worked at WTVO for a year, and the newspaper. So done the trifecta, and now this is my second tour here at the station.
Well, I mean, I live in Chicago. I've only been to Rockford, I think, once or twice. But what was it like working here in Chicago?
I liked it. We lived in Naperville, so we'd always drive out.
Wow, that is far.
It is far. But actually, I worked mostly overnights. So I would go in at like 8 p.m. and I would come home. I mean, when everybody was going into the city for work, I was going out. And I was working nasty hours. I mean, we were salaried. We were working hard. And, it was, I'd stay 10, 12 hours, easily, no problem. But I loved working in Chicago. I loved after I get off work, being able to go out and walk on Michigan Avenue. That was like the coolest. I loved being able to go out and do the stories when they would let me go. I remember one time tracking down somebody with the diocese, and I actually tracked him down at the airport and caught him just before he got on a plane. And of course, that was before 9/11. And then so I loved it. I mean, I loved the atmosphere. I loved, the people that I worked with. But it just, it's a different pace. And I think it's hard to really move up. You can move up, but it takes a little time. And like I said, we wanted to have a family, and we wanted to buy a home. And so this was easier for us to move out here. And it was a little bit of culture shock going from there, where we had computers and they had just redone that big set, and the news, made a big splash. And I came out here, and they had electric typewriters, and we still, with no computers, we had the rip and stick AP wires. And so that was all very much a part of it. It was kind of like, oh, wow, this is back to college days, right? I had to kind of rethink all of that. We still used the 6-packs, the ones ka-chunk, and you'd separate the all the different pages, and here's the directors, and here's the prompter, and here's the producers. And so like I said, it was a little culture shock, but actually it's probably good. You go back to the basics and you learn how it all fits together. And we always say that now, that so often our directors and producers, our directors, a lot of what they have, a lot of the equipment is automated. So, or it's like right at their fingertips. And sometimes when, suddenly you have to go on the fly, right? And you have to hot punch a show. Sometimes they don't know that, because everything has been programmed for them. They don't know how to hot punch a show. And so it's like, but you should know that. You should know how to do that. You should know.
What's hot punch? Wait, I don't work in TV. What's hot punch?
Hot punch means so going away from the computers, right? So in each of our scripts, a lot of our scripts, they have coding in them. And so it kicks off it allows them to roll the video just with a button, right? And it kind of cues things up for them. But when you hot punch is when you don't have a script and there's nothing cueing the cameras, and you have to punch them live, right? Whatever you need. And sometimes they don't know how to do that. Okay. And producers, they usually have a computer that times the show for them, right? So we're going to start at 6 o'clock. You have to be done by 6:28:26. And You got to subtract out the breaks and then subtract out, how much each story is and how much time do you have left, right? They don't know how to back time a show or front time a show, whichever one you choose. Because they have computers that do it for them. They have, the programs do it for them, and they don't know how to do that. But I think you forget then how important that timing is. And what happens if all of that goes away? What happens if your computer dies in the middle of it? Do you freeze? No, you've got to pick up and figure out how to time out the rest of your show without a computer in front of you. And that happens all the time. So, well, not all, it doesn't happen every day. I'm saying it happens at stations across the country every day, right? And you kind of have to learn how to adapt. And if you don't know that, I don't feel like you've got a real understanding of how all that show fits together. You got to know how much each thing takes. When you're in radio, you have to know how much that actuality is. You have to know how long that commercial is. And you got to, back time to the top of the hour because you got to catch, network or whatever. And people sometimes just don't know how to do that.
Well, do they teach that in school though?
I think it depends on where you are. At ISU, they do. They do. They're very good about teaching the basics, right? So they will force you to learn, how to back time and how to do all of that. But not all the programs do, right? Not all the journalism programs. It's let's get them in, let's move them on, let's get them out, right? That kind of thing. And I think there are some people who believe, we have computers to do that. That's why they're here. They're making our jobs easier, and they do. But what happens if they fail? You have to be ready for that one moment when things aren't perfect.
That's why radio people usually have so many skills, because things always go wrong. So they have to figure things out. They have to back time and so forth. And they usually have to write their own stuff and run their own wars.
Exactly. And a lot of that too is, you probably have this too, that internal clock inside you that, if I have a 2-minute segment, I know exactly how much I can squeeze into that 2-minute segment because you've been doing it so long and you just have that in you. But
just to be clear, so listeners know, or viewers or whatever, I've never been an anchor. I might be in the future, and I might be in the future. But the thing is, I've learned, thanks to the pandemic, I went beyond what I was trained to, and so I gained skills throughout the year. So that's what I'm saying. I've met other radio people like that too, who just had to gain all these skills. So
yeah, you do, and it's it's not. It's a good thing, I think, in so many ways, but. I do think it's good that people understand all the pieces that, it takes to pull everything together.
Yeah.
And I think we encourage them to learn more and more and more about, different aspects. And that is the beauty of the smaller markets too, is you're able to have a lot of hands-on in a lot of different things. And so when you do go to that next job, you're very marketable. And they say, wow, I know I can trust that person knows how to do all of this, can handle all of this.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for people who want to get into the business? Because realistically, just from what I've heard about TV, I already know radio pays badly, except for a few people, lucky people.
Yeah.
But for TV, though, I have heard in most markets, it's not just that people are being spoiled, wanting to be paid more. They can barely live on what they're paying.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
What advice do you have for people who want to get into it?
So I think, first of all, I think, be realistic, and understand, what the industry is going to bring to it. But I don't think that should chase you away. I do think people need to be careful. Well, first of all, if you're going to go to school, choose a school that's going to give you those skills, right? They're going to build enough skills within you or help you build those skills so that you can walk into a job with all of these, the things that you can offer each station, right? But then when you're actually choosing your first job, I do believe, and it goes back to that first part we talked about, which is get to know the company that you're working for and get to know the station. You could be making, if you're making $20 an hour in Rockford, that's like, that's awesome, right? That's a lot of, that's pretty good in Rockford. But you might go to, Omaha and make $20 an hour. you might be fine, but you go to Atlanta and make $20 an hour and it's like nothing, right? You got to know the community you're going to, the cost of living. I think, you know, I wouldn't get a second job right away. I think that, you know, learn what the job expectations are and how much it's going to require of you if you can. And I think then decide, you know, how much you can give. You know, can I set aside every Saturday and Sunday? I need to get a second job, so I need to work this. And then be honest with your employers and say, you know, this is where I'm at. I got to do this. You know, I noticed too, I mean, back when I got in the business, we had so many of us, you know, we had roommates, right? We had, you know, we shared an apartment with people and things like that. I don't see that anymore. They actually want their own space and I don't blame them. But for me, it was a way to get by for a little bit. And
also you get to know people. You get to know people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're all kind of in the same boat, you know, you kind of support each other. And so I think, you know, like I said, be realistic about the community and be realistic about your budget and, you know, be open. I think that it's great to go to your boss and say, you know, I've been here 6 months. I really feel like I've grown quite a bit. You know, I'm really looking, I'm barely making ends meet. You know, it's okay to talk to them about that. They may not be able to do something right away, but, you know, it at least gives you, gets you on the record and it gets your, you know, it gets their thoughts going. And, you know, if they think if you're that good and they think they may lose you, they're gonna step up, I think. And I just think that, you know, the whole idea is to kind of be prepared when you walk into it, that you're not going to get rich right away. It's going to take a little time. And I'm not talking just a year. I'm talking, you know, it's going to take a bit before you really are making solid money. And even then, you're not going to make enough that you want. You're going to want more always. But, you know, I mean, just understand that this is a temporary thing, right? You know, and making so little is just a way to get through the door.
What about burnout, or, you know, people who they know they love news, but they feel burned out?
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's a hard one too. I always encourage people to talk. I have an open door policy and I hope that my staff knows that, you know, if they need to talk about something, they can come in here. I made a point when I first started here that everybody was telling me that they never went in the news director's office. They always knew if they got called in the news director's office, it was a bad thing, right? And they never wanted to come in because they always thought they'd be in trouble. And I said, I want you to feel okay to come in. So I started putting candy jars in my office, and I have probably 4 or 5 going, and all different candies, right? And they know they can walk in at any time and grab a candy and a candy bar or whatever. And I want them to know that it's okay to talk about things, right? The only way to really work through a lot of that is to find some outlets. And if that includes talking, then that's what that includes. You know, talk to your news director, talk to your friends, talk to coworkers and say, what do you do to work through it? But a lot of the companies, most companies nowadays have employee assistance programs. So you can call and get help right away. Ours is fabulous here. And I think a lot of people have taken advantage of that service that's being offered. And it's a good program. They get you set up. They help you get to somebody who can help you talk through stuff. You know, it's just be open and you know, really share what the struggles are. It's tough. I mean, as a news director, you know, you have a job to do, right? You have to get the news on the air, and you've got to have these people, you got to do it in the right way, and you've got to get it on, and that's your job. You're a business. And so, you're kind of torn in a little bit. You want to be there and you want to listen, and you do, and that's so important, is to make sure that your staff is doing well, but you also have to make sure they're doing well enough to get the job done, right? And whatever that takes, whether that's me sitting down and talking with you, whether it's you calling the EAP program, or whether it's, helping you find somebody who you can relate with. There are a lot of job boards and chat rooms, and there are Facebook pages that you can join, that are Facebook groups you can join that are geared toward journalists. And especially, there's like Jane, which is for female journalists, and although I think there are males on there too. But there are always these places where you can reach out and ask advice, and reach out and connect with other journalists, especially those who are in a similar situation as you. And I think that's the best way to work through that stuff. It's life's too short to do something you hate. And so if you hate it, I think it's up to you to figure out, is this for me then? Do I need to move on? Or is this just, I'm getting used to it? And, but that's something you have to determine on your own, but I'm here to help. And I think as news directors, we have to be there to help.
Okay. Anything else you want to say?
No.
Okay.
It's such a good, I don't know how a lot of people feel, but I'm so grateful to be doing it, to be working in our business. And I think that what we do is so important and so valuable. And it hurts when you hear people say, hey, you're, journalists you guys stink, and, you're so biased, and you're awful. The media is what's bad about this country, and things like that. And I, it makes me sad, but at the same time, I can still hold my head high and know that we're doing, we try to be as ethical, we follow ethical guidelines. We are trying to do what's best for the community and what's best for the viewers. And I think it's unfair when we get accused of that. But I also know that, it's not going to change my mind that we're absolutely needed in this world, and our journalists are pretty special people, and I think that's important to really know. And I think it's good for people to absorb that and know that what I'm doing is valuable and important in this world. So, yeah.
Okay. All right.